Welcome back to Racing Rundown. We are going to be recapping a very interesting running of the 147th Preakness Stakes, which was won by early voting. If you haven't seen the race already, I don't really know why you'd be watching it at this point, but if you, for some reason, missed out on the race, early voting won this race by a length and a quarter over Epicenter and Creative Minister. So just for the reference of our Racing Rundown picks, Eric picked Epicenter. He ran second. Creative Minister hit the board for third. So nice little 2-3 that we got there. Unfortunately, didn't get the exact to there, but really good effort from early voting. There's a lot to get into. Some of the other interesting runs. Secret Oath ran fourth. Simplification had trouble. We'll talk about what happened with Simplification. He bled in the race. He ran sixth there. So obviously a horse that you can basically, for all intent and purposes, draw a line through this race and think about him in the future. But we'll talk about early voting first. But this race, you're not going to be able to tell the story of this race without telling about what happened with the favorite Epicenter in there. But we'll start out with early voting. Great trip for him. And Chad Brown had said before the race that he didn't feel that early voting didn't necessarily have to go out there and be in front. And I didn't really know that that was something that would have happened. It just seemed like the way that the race was going to set up was it would just make sense that early voting was going to be in front early. But Irad Ortiz on Armagnac decided that he was going to go take the initiative, and he put Armagnac up front there, in front by about a length, two lengths going into the first turn, and then that lead got whittled down at points when jockeys realized that they were going slow and put their horses in the game, which credit to those guys that did put their horses in the game. Jose Ortiz was certainly one of them. Brian Hernandez did a good job of getting Creative Minister up there and at least putting himself in the position where he would have favorable setups compared to the other closers and the other horses coming from behind him in Epicenter and Secret Oath. So I did think that was good from Brian Hernandez's part, but Jose Ortiz rode a great race on this. He didn't send early voting out there because he didn't have to, but he made sure that he kept Armagnac in there. And Armagnac was never going to win the Preakness, so he just put himself in the perfect position where he was going to be able to take him up. And then he got first run on Epicenter. He got first run on Creative Minister. He got first run on Secret Oath. He was in front by a good amount going into the stretch. He looked like he was getting a little bit tired down the lane, and that obviously we'll discuss that in terms of what the future races for him would be, but had plenty in terms of what this race was to be able to hold on and win this. So very good run from early voting here. He's done really nothing wrong in the course of his career. I heaped a lot of praise on him after the Wood Memorial. The reason that I didn't pick him, and I talked about this on Racing Rundown, was I thought that there was going to be a little bit more pace presence and they were going to soften him up a little bit too much. But Epicenter had too much to do coming off the turn. That was another thing that really kind of put the race to bed for early voting. And the other horses didn't. The pace certainly wasn't there for anybody that wasn't Epicenter to win this race. And I'll turn over to Eric now, and just without getting into Epicenter immediately right now, what were your thoughts on early voting's Preakness win?
This was a great win by early voting. I was really impressed with him. This is a horse who has always had the talent, a horse who I've been keeping an eye on, and it just never seemed like this was going to be the race for him to win. In terms of the late developments with Armagnac and Benwick getting thrown into the mix, but he overcame it. He showed the adaptability, and this only being his fourth start, I think you can only expect him to keep getting better from this. And it did help that a lot of the other favorites probably didn't get the best run of the race, whereas he's had the perfect trip. Jose Ortiz rode a beautiful race, letting the speed go and just biding his time, and it was perfect. It was easy. It was a great win, great performance by this horse. That being said, I'm not so convinced he was the best horse in the race. We'll dive into that, of course, but I'm not going to take anything away. This was an exceptional win, great for these connections. For a guy like Chad Brown, just in any sport in general, you don't love a guy that dominates things, but Chad Brown is likable, and Seth Klarman is likable. They do it the right way. Proper horseman Chad Brown is, and he's got a great team around him. And, of course, Seth Klarman is a huge supporter of the game. He keeps his horses in training. When cloud computing, I remember his first Preakness winner now, got on a bad streak. He kept the faith. They did not put him out to pasture too early, and that just makes me excited. It makes me think, hey, we're going to have early voting for a while as long as things go well. So that's awesome. These are connections, once again, you're just happy to see win. And even though, maybe not the most deserving winner, in my opinion, great to see them get their second Preakness, first for Jose Ortiz, which is also awesome.
Yeah, and there's a couple things that I want to say, just add at the end about early voting before we move on. And this is not an original thought to me. Pretty much every other person has been saying this, so this is not this should not be some watershed thing. And I don't want to act like this is some watershed uh great revelation, but props has to be given to Chad Brown for not getting the Derby fever with this horse. It was quite obvious, given the setup of the way that the Kentucky Derby was going to be, that the Derby was not the race for early voting. And Chad Brown's never won the Kentucky Derby before. He's the best trainer in the United States right now. It would be understandable if he got Derby fever with early voting and said, okay, well, we have the Derby spot. Let's go. We can do well in the Kentucky Derby. And given how the race ended up setting up in terms of the speed that was there, early voting would have had no chance in the Kentucky Derby. And Chad Brown knew that. Credit to Chad Brown. Before the race, he knew that the setup was going to be that they were going to go rather quick. So the restraint that he showed with this horse to wait for his opportunity to win should absolutely be applauded, because master horsemanship there with Chad Brown. And then one thing I do have to say, because if you're not a regular listener of Racing Rundown, you might be surprised why I'm going to do this, but if you are a regular listener, this will be no surprise to you. But screw these speed figures. Let's go back to February 5th when this horse won the Withers Stakes. He was given a 78 Beyer figure. Mind you, on the same weekend, Messier received a 103 speed figure for a literal workout against claimers and a single turf horse. So, more so than anything else, early voting winning the Preakness should just be the absolute definition of why you cannot rely 100% solely on the speed figure. The speed figures, the saying that a lot of folks like to use with speed figures is they never lie. And my response to that is they never lie except when they do. The Withers was absolutely atrociously wrong. My mantra after the Withers has been, I'm not listening to a single speed figure for any of the races for 3-year-olds for the rest of the year. And I've kept that through. I'm always a person who says, damn the figures anyway, but it's been more so the case this year. And just one final emphasis on how the Beyer had a terrible year with the figures for the 3-year-olds. And it wasn't just at Aqueduct. It certainly was at Aqueduct, but the Santa Anita figures were wrong with the Santa Anita horses, and it's something that should be recognized. And for a formula that is very widely used and touted by some of its most ardent defenders as the only way to pick horse races, it has not. This is not a good day for Beyer speed figures. That early voting just won this race in as emphatic of a manner as he had.
And I totally agree. This was a rant I went on pre-Kentucky Derby, even though the Withers obviously didn't play much of a role in the Kentucky Derby. It was more along the lines of, listen, a good horse can come from anywhere, and if we're relying on a computed number to determine the quality of horses, that's going to put you at a disadvantage. And I know that the notion's shifted, of course, since then because of what early voting did in the Wood Memorial and everybody getting the cloud computing vibes with this guy. But all things considered, it's obviously shown the issues with only relying on speed figures, because it's not that they're bad. They can be very helpful in certain situations, but there are a lot of people out there who rely on them as their sole means of picking a race and as the deciding factor between certain horses. And while occasionally that can be the right move, it's once again, the Derby winner had some of the worst Beyer speed figures coming in. Early voting, he had originally a 78. That's what they viewed it as, and I don't care that they upgraded it to an 87 after they realized it was wrong. It still shows that there was a flaw in how they viewed the Withers in itself, and obviously we saw that come to hand. So, I mean, it certainly should not be a reason, especially with a crop like this. This is not a very strong group of 3-year-olds, all things considered. So there's with one that's as wonky as this bunch, it just further shows speed figures cannot be the reliance. And I'm pretty sure 3 weeks from now we'll hear about somebody who has great figures, and that'll be the Belmont horse, and they'll probably get beat.
And now we're going to move on to, at least from my perspective and Eric's perspective, the big aspect of this race, which was the favorite Epicenter, who did get a runner-up effort in the Preakness, so wasn't as bad as it maybe potentially could have been. But I know, Eric, you've been chomping on the bit ever since the race concluded to talk about this. So I'm going to give you the floor to talk about the ride from Epicenter. Which were you a fan of the ride? I am a little bit confused as to whether or not you thought this was a good ride or not.
Listen, and Jack, you know this well, given how much racing we talk both in our recordings and off air. I'm going to give a rider their flowers when they deserve it, and I'm also going to, I don't know how to put it nicely, not be nice to a rider when the ride is not good. And I get horses can find trouble on their own, things like that, but I get really annoyed when a horse is not given the best opportunity to win a race. And don't take it from me. Take it from Steve Asmussen himself. He said that he was not given the opportunity from the gate to be put in the best position to win, and from there got buried by Joel Rosario. And listen, Joel Rosario can put on a hell of a ride on his best day, but on his worst day, he can be the reason the best horse loses a race, and that's what happened here. I didn't think taking back and being second last was the worst thing. I mean, the pace was not quick, but obviously on talent, the horse can make it up. We saw him do it. However, the problem is burying yourself in the third, fourth flight of a race on the inside and then having no intention to get off of it, especially at a track like Pimlico. This is not a place where there's a lot of room to operate on the turns. And this is, I know people like to make fun of the tight turns in that being brought up. That hurts the off the pace horses more than anything. You just can't rally up the rail at Pimlico because there's nowhere to go most of the time. In War of Will came up the inside under Tyler Gaffleone to win the Preakness in 2019. He was just sitting right behind the leader, and that's what Epicenter was there. I would have had no problem with him sitting on the inside. But when you are expected to maneuver around tiring horses or speed that is idling or picking up, there's no winning. And there were multiple stages in the race where Joel Rosario had the opportunity to establish better positions so he wouldn't get stuck inside of horses heading into the far turn, but he never took them. And that's ultimately what got him beat. He fell asleep at the wheel, got himself buried on multiple occasions, and the stopping that occurred around the turn and having to ask for position, and he was a little in tight with Skippy Longstalking at a point on the turn. That was the deciding factor in this Preakness. I think if he's moved at a better time and put in the right position, he wins this race, and we're having a totally different discussion. And listen, I know it's easy to say from out here, but fact of the matter is, this was a ride where you have to know you cannot be in that position heading into the far turn. You just have to. It is fine if you lose ground if you're on the best horse in the race, even if you're out in the 2 or 3 path. But he was so committed to the rail, and with how well Epicenter picked up late in the game, it just shows you that with a clean ride, he would have won this race, even with the pace in front of him. He would have beaten early voting on the spot if given the right opportunity to. So I think a lot of people are going to look to the break, and if you watch the jockey cam that NBC had, I think it shows perfectly that Joel Rosario had the opportunity to establish a stopping position heading into the first turn, but instead backed out of it. And while I think that was the first part, the second part was not acting to establish closer position up the backstretch. I think the sleepiness there is ultimately what cost Epicenter the win, and now we're talking about a horse who was probably the best runner in the first 2 legs of the Triple Crown. One was not due to the ride, one was just due to the pace collapsing, and this one was 100% the ride. If he's given the right ride, he's definitely the winner. And once again, we're talking about Steve Asmussen avenging his Derby loss with this horse. And I'm not sure what's next. I'm sure we'll dive into that next, Jack. But still, it's just frustrating when the best horse is not given the best opportunity to win the race.
Yeah, and I would like to just add to Epicenter. I don't have any further to add. Eric pretty much said everything that I could say. The one thing that I noticed myself saying, and it's not a reason why he lost the race, but I was just a little bit surprised that Joel Rosario didn't get Epicenter closer. I thought that he's shown speed in some of his races in the past, so it's not like that would have hurt the horse. So I thought he could have done that, but I didn't think it was I didn't think it was an absolute deal breaker for the ride. But everything that Eric said about it is absolutely how I feel. I want to touch on a couple of the other runners from this race before we move on and talk about potential future out of this race. The first horse that I want to get to is, of course, the filly Secret Oath. She ran the same race that she ran in the Arkansas Derby here. It looked eerily similar. She got pinched back, different point in the race. She got pinched back. She got pinched back at the start. And in the Arkansas Derby, she got pinched back going down the backside. And she made a very similar rally, looked really big off the turn, or looked really big going into the turn. And then off the turn, she looked like she was in a really good position, and then she just flattened out. We just have to admit it. She's just not good enough to beat the boys. And, she's a great 3-year-old filly. She's gonna have some really good runs against the 3-year-old fillies, but it's time to admit that Secret Oath is not good enough to beat the boys. And I would be surprised if we see her. I mean, Dwayne Lucas kind of tacitly admitted that she's not going to run against the boys for the rest of the year. I'd be surprised if we see her against the boys in the rest of her career, because she's just not good enough to do it. And I thought that, if this was a crop, that if there was a really good 3-year-old filly, this would be the crop that a really good 3-year-old filly would beat. So that's my take with Secret Oath. Very similar setup to the Arkansas Derby. Didn't run that much better than she did in the Arkansas Derby. So I would actually honestly say that this was a better run than the Arkansas Derby, but marginally better. I thought Creative Minister, obviously I talked about him a little bit, but stepping up to Graded Stakes Company for the first time coming out of that allowance race, very, very good step up for him. He's a horse to keep an eye on for some of the races later on this year. Potentially could be in the Belmont Stakes. We'll get to that, obviously, but he's a good horse, putting up a good effort behind Epicenter and early voting. I thought that, I haven't really determined whether or not I'm in love with the move down the backside that Brian Hernandez Jr. gave. Initially, I thought he might have moved a bit too soon, but now I'm starting to think that he put his horse in the best position to run as well as he could, and it's just Epicenter was better, and early voting was never going to come back to him. So third was the best that Creative Minister was going to run in there. I obviously, at the top of the show, mentioned that Simplification didn't run well, and then really there's not a whole lot other than Armagnac was a pace casualty, and why the hell did Happy Jack and Fenwick take money out of that? So I don't know if you have anything to add on Secret Oath or Creative Minister, Eric, but that is where I stand with some of the other runners from the Preakness.
Yeah, I think it was kind of dominated by the top two, right? It wasn't much more than that. I think Secret Oath, she just got to stick to the girls at this rate. I think it's clear. It was always kind of clear to me that Epicenter was going to be better than her, but I think we learned that even a couple others would. She did lose ground on the turn, but that's kind of what's going to happen when you're coming from off the pace. You still got to be able to overcome things like that. I think for Simplification, I thought he bled and he was going to get some time off, but he can still be an excellent second half of the year horse, or a good 4-year-old even. He's got a ton of talent no matter what. And then Creative Minister, obviously this was huge to put in this kind of effort. He was clearly third best in here, but I think being third best over Simplification, Secret Oath, and others, that tells me, okay, you're not too bad. And he wasn't overly far off of Epicenter and early voting on top of all that. I couldn't get a good read on him for the Belmont. I think pedigree-wise, it would be pushing it to get that distance. And physically, he might be a little limited, but I think that's kind of the theme with a lot of horses in this crop. So it certainly wouldn't be the worst move, I think, to maybe go tackle the Belmont with. And we know Kenny McPeak is more than willing to take that opportunity when given the chance. So we'll see with him. But I think the horses that obviously you have to really be squarely focused on is the top two from here. I don't think that early voting's not a Belmont horse. It's not even, I don't think he's not. Chad Brown knows it. Seth Klarman knows it. They're not going to put him in that position. I am interested to see where they go from here. Chad Brown's mentioned the Haskell being the ultimate target for Jack Christopher. Well, he's got two other really good 3-year-olds in Zandon and early voting who could easily also make that their race. So I'm excited to see where he decides to position his horses throughout the summer and where he ultimately puts them to maximize their potential and their value. And for Epicenter, I'd love to see him in the Belmont. I mean, that's just that. And I think he's another one where I don't know if he can get the 1.5 miles, but I'd love to see him try, because he is the best horse in this crop, in my opinion. He's certainly the most gritty, and I think he's a couple better circumstances away from being a horse on the line with a Triple Crown.
Yeah, I will kind of get a little bit candid on what I've been doing the past couple of days with Racing Rundown. I have the schedule for the way that the podcast is going to go between from this point going into next week all the way through to the middle of September. So I'm just been absolutely salivating at what is going to happen with Chad Brown and how he's placing his turf mares. That's going to be really entertaining. And now you throw in, okay, he's got a Preakness winner in early voting. He's got a really good a horse that's coming out of a really good effort from in the Kentucky Derby in Zandon, and obviously with the Haskell being the target for Jack Christopher, it's like, okay, well, that's going to be really fun to see what Chad's going to do with those horses, and see, okay, well, who's going to run against who? Is Jack Christopher going to run by himself in the Haskell? Is early voting going to go to the Haskell with him? Is Zandon going to go to the Jim Dandy? So I'm very, very excited to see how the races are going to be picking. Chad's going to pick and choose the races for his three really good 3-year-olds. Obviously for Epicenter, I was really hoping before the race that he was going to win the Preakness. I know I picked Creative Minister and all that, but I wanted Epicenter to win the Preakness because I felt that if Epicenter won the Preakness, they would go on to the Belmont Stakes, and they could obviously still go on. By the way, we're recording this Saturday night, 3 hours after the Preakness, so we're just purely speculating. There's no comments from any trainers right now at this point, so anything that we say could be completely outdated by Monday, but we're just kind of speculating right now. But I'd love to see Epicenter go in the Belmont Stakes because, the stereotypical thing that happens every time in the Belmont is that obviously there's the closers that take money because people think, okay, well, a mile and a half, these horses will have plenty of ground to roll. But there is also the trend from history that the more forwardly placed you are on the Belmont, the better you tend to run. And I think that if Epicenter were to just looking at potentially what the Belmont could look like, I think that he could be the kind of horse that could sit second off of a horse like We the People and be that one that he's not looking great down the stretch, but I think that he could be that one that's just barely getting there, kind of in the way of like a Palace Malice was doing it down the stretch, just purely in terms of the way Palace Malice ran the stretch run of his Belmont. I think that that's how Epicenter could look. But the 3-year-old landscape looks very interesting right now because Epicenter is clearly the best horse, but he hasn't won a truly marquee race. I guess you can call the Louisiana Derby a marquee race, but he's gotten beat by circumstances in both of his 2 runs in the Triple Crown. So if he runs in the Belmont, hopefully for him that will be third time's the charm, and he finally gets to get his grade 1 and all that fun stuff. But going on forward from here, there's plenty of opportunities for him to be able to win big graded stakes races in a grade 1. But what that route ends up being time will tell what that is. I agree with Eric. I'm not really too sure how to get a read on anyone else from this race. Obviously, Simplification isn't going to go on further in the Triple Crown. Secret Oath is going to go back to running against the fillies, and everyone else. Creative Minister is the only other horse that would potentially be considered for the Belmont. I will say one other thing because I didn't talk about early voting. I am normally a run your horses in the Triple Crown races. I do get frustrated when connections don't run their good horses in all 3 of the Triple Crown races or in multiple Triple Crown races. But this is a case that I will not be upset when early voting does not run in the Belmont Stakes. And I'm saying when because he's not going to get the Belmont. We just talked about how Chad Brown showed tremendous restraint in the Kentucky Derby. He's not go chase a Triple Crown race because I want to win a Triple Crown race. And if they didn't chase the Kentucky Derby with early voting, and early voting, I think, had a better chance to get 1.25 miles, then he has no chance to get 1.5 miles. He was getting a little bit weary down the stretch of the Preakness. And while I can't say that he would have lost going 1.25 miles, absolutely he would have lost going 1.5 miles in here. So this race Preakness is not written on this horse or I should say Belmont is not written on this Preakness win for early voting. Excuse my mix up in words there, but he should not go on to the Belmont Stakes. I know some people are going to be upset, but that's just what's best for the horse. There's absolutely no universe where he gets 1.5 miles. So the summer will be interesting. I don't know if we'll see any horses from the Preakness. I don't know if we'll see Epicenter and nobody else or whatever ends up happening. But the summer is going to be very interesting because the 3-year-old division is very hazy. The best horse hasn't won a grade 1. He hasn't won a grade 1. And then, the other horses that have won Triple Crown races have certainly, if not won the race entirely because of circumstances, have been highly benefited by circumstance. So I guess the final point that I'll make is Epicenter at this point is probably still the favorite for the Eclipse Award, but I don't think I think that there is potential for him to wind up not being the best 3-year-old come the end of the year in terms of resume. Do you see that being a possibility, Eric, or do you think at some point, uh, maybe come summertime, Epicenter is going to rattle off a couple of grade ones, maybe Travers, Pennsylvania Derby, and put that to bed?
I think now it's kind of just anybody's game. I think for Epicenter, he's got to do something. You got to win a big race of some kind, and I think it's really weird because soon we're going to have to throw in the older horses, right? I mean, you maybe get through the summer, obviously Haskell, Travers, a couple months from now, but sooner than later you're going to have to put them up against the older horses of the crop and see who can handle that. And whoever handles it best is normally the one that can be crowned 3-year-old champion. And I think that's where things will get really interesting. But I look at, obviously, we're still have the Belmont to go Haskell, but Travers is, at this point, is reaching points of becoming a fourth Triple Crown race with optimal spacing for all the Triple Crown current format haters. But in terms of that race, I look at it now and I couldn't tell you who could win it. It's we're at that point, but I know whoever does win it is probably in the position to maybe be the 3-year-old champ, but they could be the best horse. It's very weird to think about, but it's fun to think about. It just means we're in for an interesting summer. It's not like this award is going to be decided 3 weeks from now. It's going to be decided 3 to 5 months from now, and that of course is going to make more people want to come back and see how it all plays out. So I really do think that'll be a fun aspect. It's going to be weird. It's going to be interesting. Who knows? Maybe the best horse of this crop hasn't even made a start on the Triple Crown Trail or won't. So it's fun. It's fun to think that way. We'll obviously see how it all plays out.
And with that being mentioned, that's just kind of the thing that I will end this on is that the summer is going to be what decides everything. Saratoga, obviously, the Haskell will have a pretty good field in it, but that's going to be where the marquee events are going to have. We'll see. We're not going to not have racing rundown for the 3 weeks until the Belmont, but we'll see you back for 3 weeks. Or in 3 weeks for the Belmont. I'm not sure that the Belmont's going to provide too much of an answer in terms of the 3-year-old division, but from that point onwards, Haskell, Travers, Pennsylvania Derby, Jim Dandy to a lesser extent. That's going to be the prep. We'll see who runs there, but it's going to be a very fun summer to say the least. And that's kind of it for what we have to say about the Preakness. We will see you upcoming for this week, episode 160 of Racing Rundown, where we'll recap everything from the Preakness card, in the undercard races, and then talk about the stakes action on Memorial Day weekend.